Okay, guys, I'm going to get super personal today. I'm going to tell you a story about how I almost got my mom killed on Mother's Day and the super important lesson that I learned from that day. I'm going to tell you about one of the most beautiful places on earth, and it's so pretty that's where I'm going to have my ashes scattered. And I'm going to tell you all the little secret places in my own neck of the woods, a place where tens of thousands of people save up all year to come visit. So welcome to the Crystal Coast of North Carolina. I cannot wait to share it with you. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and my mission is to bring you epic but doable adventures from around the world. If you're like me, you don't want to live an ordinary life. You want to live a kick-ass life. And one way to do so is to add adventure travel to your life. I find adventure travel brings out the best in me. It challenges me, it encourages me, it enlightens me, and it inspires me to lead a bigger life. On this program, you'll learn about amazing adventures from around the world, plus get the tools and information you need so you can do these adventures with confidence. You'll come home feeling empowered and with amazing memories and stories that you can relive forever. And don't worry, the bar is such that my relatively fit 58-year-old body, particularly with some training, can do these adventures, and you can too. So let's get started with today's adventure in my own neck of the woods on the coast of North Carolina, just south of the Outer Banks and north of Wilmington, an area we refer to as the Crystal Coast. Since I headed off to college at the age of 17, I've been pretty much of a gypsy. I've lost track of times, probably around 30 times, I would say, and I have lived in 8 different states, but I keep coming back to North Carolina. It's like a boomerang, and I'm back and I'm back and I'm back. I'll go someplace for a couple of years, and back I come. There's just something about Eastern North Carolina that draws me like a magnet. I've owned 4 homes here over the years, and my current house, I'm only a few miles from the ocean, so it's got so much to offer. The people are good-natured, fun-loving, traditional American value, just good salt-of-the-earth people that work hard, play hard, and there are so many ways to play around here. That's one reason we've become more and more popular, and now that we've got better roads, people are discovering us. But I want you to learn about this unique area before it becomes too crowded. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And while I mentioned in the intro that people save up all year to come here, this is an area that you can pretty much tailor your adventure to your budget. I'm going to tell you about some ways that you can have some free camping opportunities, even waterfront camping opportunities. And if you want to go luxury, we've got that too. We've got some monster luxury homes with 10 bedrooms you can rent if you want to have a whole family compound get together. Unlike most of the adventures that we cover on this podcast, where you often meet people from around the world or other fellow adventurers, this is a place that you come to with the people that you love, whether it's your family, friends, significant other, etc., because the activities here are generally done with the people that you love. You might join a tour group and meet some people there, but generally speaking, when people come on vacation in this area, they've come with loved ones and not solo. I want to also mention, too, that this area is not just great for adventure, but it's also wonderful for history buffs. And I was interviewed on the Amateur Traveler, episode 612, of which I'll put a link in the show notes, which I covered more with Chris, the different kind of historical activities and more of the places to go and things to see that are not adventure-oriented. So you can listen to both of these to get a full spectrum, particularly if you're coming with family members that may not be as adventurous as you are. So it really does offer something for the entire family. One nice thing about visiting this area is you get to have a base camp, so you're not moving every single night and packing and unpacking, which, although sometimes that's necessary, can be a bit of a pain. Here you pick a base camp, whether it's a campsite, a rental home, an Airbnb, oceanfront hotel, or a motel on the mainland. We've got whatever kind of accommodation and budget you need, we've got that going on here for you. So you pick one of the towns based on the activities that you'd like to do, and everything's very close by, and you will need a car because we don't have good public transport here. So either rent a car if you're flying in or drive here. And everything is within a pretty reasonably short drive to get to do any of the different things that we're going to be talking about today. I think for today, I'm just going to break down the different activities individually and go through the different kinds of things that you can do. And I'm going to start with my first love, which is hiking. And the hiking here is completely different than what I consider my normal mountain hikes because our landscape is so utterly different. We don't have hills here to speak of. It's pretty flat. And we have a nice sandy soil, which makes it really easy on the joints. What I love about this area is we've got several cool ecosystems that you can explore on foot. The beach itself, of which we have Bogue Banks, which is a 26-mile island that you can walk the entire length if you'd like. We also have maritime forest walks, which you're in these old live oak and Yaupon holly where you're covered, where the trees have been carved by the wind, and underneath is just this magical little ecosystem that's really cool. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of those different trails. But we also have got forests. Our forests here aren't filled with oak trees and such that you might often think of when you think of forests. Ours are pine forests that are harvested for lumber, pulp for the local paper mill, and wood chips for overseas. And because of our abundance of waterways and the great soil for the pine trees, this in the past, our area was huge in the turpentine, tar, pitch, and the lumber business because we had the waterways to get the lumber, et cetera, out. And after the whole economy collapsed during the Civil War, the locals had to figure out something else to do because nobody else wanted the lumber anymore. So they turned to moonshine. And it turned out that they had some of the most popular moonshine up and down the East Coast. So in this area, we were pretty much subsistence farming and fishing and moonshining until World War II broke out and the Marine Corps decided to establish the Cherry Point Marine Corps Air Station in Havelock. Worried that war was imminent, they broke ground on the base just 17 days before Pearl Harbor, and then they went full steam ahead to complete it. I lived there as a child until I was around 8 years old, playing in the Neuse River that I'll be talking about a little bit later, completely oblivious to the war going on overseas in Southeast Asia. But I digress. Let's get back to hiking in the forest. In these forests, which at first glance to me, I was like, kind of boring pine trees, because it's just a bunch of planted pine trees. But if you look closely, you also see that, again, there's this unique ecosystem. A lot of the areas might be boggy, and you'll see Venus flytraps and pitcher plants. And so you'll get to see up close and personal some really unique plants that can only be found, to the best of my knowledge, in eastern North Carolina. It's not at all unusual to see one of those woody woodpecker, pileated woodpeckers flying around. You'll hear their, I can't do that. I won't even bother with that. But anyway, they're really cool with the big, oversized, red-crested head and all that. So I love when I see those. In fact, I have some living in my backyard as well. And you might even be lucky enough to see a black bear. But don't worry, they're hunted around here, so as soon as they see you, they're going to bolt. Along the rivers, you're likely to see an osprey. In fact, along the Neuse River, there's a breeding pair that's right on the river along the trail that I'm going to send you on. I can say that you're going to see the osprey with confidence because the osprey keep their same nest each year and just keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time I've taken the Neosok Trail, I've seen the mom and dad and 2 chicks in the nest. And if you're lucky, you'll see a bald eagle. It's not unusual also to see white-tailed deer. And although I've never seen them, it's possible to see a small alligator. Also be alert, we do have snakes here. You're likely only to see a black racer going across the trail, if any at all. I don't believe I've ever seen one on any of the trails around here, but we do have a couple of poisonous ones, so never put your hand or feet where you can't see. And again, they're going to be scared of you. Bites generally occur when people put their hands in their feet where they can't see, and there's a snake there resting, and it bites you because it got scared. It's a very rare occurrence. If you're careful, it's not going to be an issue. Just stay on the trail. And for the record, I've never met anybody who's been bit. A lot of times people ask me, Kit, is this the Outer Banks? And no, technically we're not the Outer Banks. I've sometimes heard us refer to not just the Crystal Coast, but as the Lower Banks. We're far less developed. It wasn't really until the last decade that we actually had some decent roads to get here. So we were much less populated in that area. And plus we didn't have all that, the population density of D.C. and Virginia Beach that would go to Nag's Head for the weekends and for the holidays. So we were kind of like this little hidden gem that it was difficult to get to, so a lot of people didn't. Most of the buildings here are not more than 2 stories high, so our beaches are not filled with those mega condos that go to the moon. So when you drive by, you can actually see the beach in many cases, unlike a lot of the beachfront property along up and down the East Coast. There are limited public accesses, so if you do want to go to the beach, you either need to go to the public access parking lots, the state park parking lots, or rent one of the homes on the island where you'll have beach access. which is one nice thing too, even though it's a pain if you don't have the beach rental home, it keeps the beaches nice and private. There is very little crowding outside of the public beach accesses. And the beach itself on Bogue Banks, it's an island, a barrier island, that runs over 20 miles. So you can walk to your heart's content. I'll also put a link to the tide tables because it is important to pay attention to the tides. If you haven't walked on the beach at high tide, it's really difficult. It's a great workout because you're really lifting those feet up each time. So you do try to do your walks during or around low tide, which happens twice a day. Our beaches themselves are gorgeous. I've been to some beaches where they're really shelly and rocky and uncomfortable to walk on. Ours are pristine, wide, white sand beaches, just beautiful to walk on. And another cool thing is because of the way that North Carolina is shaped in this section of the state, our beaches run east to west, so you get to see the sunrise and the sunset, unlike most of the Eastern Shore beaches, which run north to south, so faced east, so you just see the sunrise there. Here, most times of the year, you get to see the sunrise and the sunset. So it makes it really cool, and we get some amazing sunrises and sunsets. So I highly encourage you to get up early in the morning to see those and head back to the water for sunset. Quite pretty. One of the best beach accesses, and you get free parking, is at Fort Macon State Park. This fort has been in existence for about 300 years, and it has been used extensively throughout the different wars, from the Civil War, where I have a cute story to tell you about that. Also, even in World War II, the U-boats were out off the shore, and my mom remembers, she grew up here in a local town called Beaufort. She remembers seeing when they would get one of our merchant marine ships and shoot it down and see the fires out at sea at night, and remembers when they had the blackouts where if you were driving at night, you had to tape up your headlights so that the enemy could not see us. So anyway, at Fort Macon, before I tell you a little bit about the beach there itself, there's a really cute story there. During the Civil War, Fort Macon changed hands 3 times, and there's all sorts of war debris left behind from the different battles. And when it's been unearthed, the people that are working on the fort would generally just put the relics in this one room. So now during World War II, again, this is a very active coastline because we did have the German U-boats off the coast. Some troops from Brooklyn were assigned to Fort Macon, and they were cold in this drafty fort. So one of the guys got this great idea to use these old shells that they found in the relic room as andirons to kind of lift up the logs and build a fire and keep themselves warm. Well, you know what happened? One of the shells was still live and it blew up. And so although one guy got hurt, probably the guy that put the thing in, nobody was seriously hurt because the guy that got shot with the shell was a Yank from Brooklyn, and the shell was a Confederate shell back from the Civil War. Even though 70 some odd years had passed and it's now World War II, according to Ripley's Believe It or Not, that shot was considered the final shot of the Civil War. You just can't make this stuff up. That very same Brooklyn Coast Guard troop their job was to make sure no Germans came ashore. So one night when they were out in patrol, they saw a boat trying to sneak up to shore. So they got their guns and they go and they surround the people as they exit the boat. And so they're all excited, and the people on the boat are all excited, and they're both talking to each other, and they can't understand each other. And so they grabbed their prisoners, and they brought them back to the fort. And fortunately, somebody at the fort was a local, and they realized that the men that they had captured were actually local fishermen from further down the shore. It turns out that because we've been so isolated over the centuries, that there's pockets of Old English that, because they never really interacted with the rest of the country, they maintain their Old British dialect, which over the years has morphed to something that is hardly recognizable as either American or British English. And so these Brooklyn guys couldn't understand what the local people call them the hoity-toiters. They've got this accent and this brogue that is really, really difficult, even for locals to understand. I'll put a link to a YouTube video that kind of explains what I'm talking about. But can you imagine the surprise when they found out that these fishermen were actually on the same side? So anyway, there's a lot of really cool history in this area, and Fort Macon does a great exhibit, which is absolutely free. Donations are, of course, gladly accepted. But it makes a wonderful afternoon, particularly if you happen to get a rainy afternoon. If the weather's nice, definitely take the Maritime Walk. It's a little over 3 miles, fairly easy. All the walking around here is pretty easy because most everything is level. It has interpretive signs along the way. You're going through the Maritime Forest. Maritime forests are where the vegetation that can handle the wind and the salt spray from the ocean, the live oaks, the Yaupon hollies, and all that, create this dense canopy, and the wind shapes the trees, so there's this arc over them. And so underneath the trees, you have this cool little ecosystem that is protected from the harsh beach winds and salt spray. And it's just a magical little walk. Sometimes there's boardwalks in our area. Sometimes we'll have these little boggy areas. So you might see a little boardwalk, but mostly it's a sandy path. So it's really easy on the knees and the feet and all that. You're also welcome to mountain bike it too if you'd like. Although I've not seen them do it, it is advertised that you're able to do it. So that would be fun. Not a particularly challenging track, but it would be a beautiful track. In the Fort Macon area, over the years, they've recorded over 300 species of birds. And you'll particularly see a lot of the waterfowl as you pass through some of the marshlands on the sound side. It also spends a little bit of time on the ocean itself. And again, when you're on the ocean walks, you want to make sure you're paying attention to the tide tables, because walking on the sand at high tide is really difficult because you really have to lift your feet. It's a great workout, and no harm in doing it. It just makes it a lot harder than if you're walking on the hard, low tide sand. So watch the tide tables. I'll put a link in the show notes, of course. On the inlet of Fort Macon, you can see where the sound and the ocean meet, and also a river meeting there too. So you've got a very, very erratic, just cool waterways. And you can't swim there. You can either swim the sound or the ocean, not at the inlet. The inlets are very dangerous to swim in, but quite beautiful to look at. A great place for a picnic. In addition to Fort Macon, you can also hike or bike, if you have fat tires, the entire length of the beach. The beach itself is about 26 miles, I believe it is, coast to coast, and just a stunningly beautiful beach. Like I said, it's not overgrown at all. Most buildings are not more than 2 or 3 stories high. It's almost all homes. So you see very few businesses, and I think because of real estate, it's kind of expensive on the ocean. And even though this is a year-round destination, people tend to only come here in the summer, so it's hard for a restaurant to stay afloat, only getting business 2 to 3 months out of the year. But there are a couple of jewels, like if you want to stop by and have a quick one at the Tackle Box. It's right on the Atlantic Beach Circle. Inexpensive, I think just beer and wine. I think that's all they sell there, cash only. Great little local hangout. And at Atlantic Beach Circle is one of the few areas that you can actually see the ocean from your restaurant seat. A little further on down, we've got piers. You can also stop in there and take a little bit of a break. But the ocean is just a delightful, nice family, not over-commercialized at all. We have a few of the beach stores, but not a whole lot. It's mainly just people coming down, just having a nice vacation with their family. And if you have kids, there's lots of activities for the kids too, including water slides and go-karts and putt-putt golf, etc. If you want to get back under the trees again, we've got the Croatan Forest nearby. This is a national forest, mainly of pine trees. If you go into the Croatan, be on the lookout when you're around the boggy areas. You'll often see Venus flytraps and pitcher plants, the carnivorous plants that eat the flies and all that. So in the Croatan Forest, we've got several trails. The one that is on Highway 24 goes right through the Patsy Pond Trail, and that's also a hunting area, as all of our forests are. So in hunting season, which is October to December, make sure you're wearing bright orange so you're not mistaken for a deer. And also you want to go in the forest pretty much from October to May. Once mosquitoes come out, you don't want to be in the forest. So despite the fact that most of our visitors come in the summertime for their summer vacation, actually the best times are the fall and the spring. If I had to pick one, I'd say fall, because the weather's more stable. You do have the risk of hurricanes, and we did have a nasty one this last season. So if you do come in the fall, make sure you get travel insurance so you're reimbursed any expensive costs that you might have to get here should you have to cancel for a hurricane. So yeah, the Patsy Pond Trail, further down the road a little bit, you've got the beautiful Cedar Point Trail. That takes you not just through the pine, but also on boardwalks and little bridges over through the coastal marsh. And that is just a really unique ecosystem in and of itself. You'll often see the herons and the egrets out there fishing. If you're there at low tide, you'll smell that pungent little low tide boggy smell and see all the little fiddler crabs running out of the way when they see you coming. Just a nice, peaceful walk. And again, very easy, only a few miles, maybe take you 20 minutes to do the big loop there, but it's quite beautiful. There's also a campground there that you can reserve spots to stay either with a RV or a tent. beautiful area. A launch site too. I know we're going to talk about kayaking a little bit, but this is while we're on this, there's a launch site for boats and kayaks, and you can take your kayak out to this island that's not too far away and out into the White Oak River. And I remember taking a yoga class out on this island. So you're out in the middle of the White, just beautiful underneath all these live oaks, looking on this just panoramic water view. Absolutely free, folks. Just great recreational area. So continuing on back over towards the Fort Macon area and going up the river, up the Neuse River, which dumps into the ocean. There we have two really nice hiking areas. My parents always called it the Neosok, but it's spelled Nusiak, so I'm not sure which way it's actually pronounced. But the Neosok Trail runs about 20 miles. My parents were always very active, and one of their favorite trails in this area is the Neosok Trail. And when I first moved back to the area 4 years ago, on Mother's Day, I said, Mom, what would you like to do for Mother's Day? And so at the time, my 90-year-old mother, now granted, she was in great shape for 90 years old, but my 90-year-old mother said, I'd like to have a picnic and take a little hike and have a picnic on the Neuse River and go on the Neosok Trail. I said, oh, that's great. I love hiking. So I'd never done it, despite the fact that I've often lived in this area. So my 90-year-old mother, my 68-year-old mentally ill brother, and myself head off for a picnic on the Neosok Trail. And the plan was we were going to park. There's a couple of parking spots. We're going to park at this one spot, hike the couple of miles over to the river where we're going to have the picnic. But when we got there, I was going to run back on the road, get the car and the picnic lunch, and drive it back up to the picnic site while my brother and my mother rested by looking at the water. Great plan. So off we go into the woods, and we're walking, and this trail was a little bit more complex than I had anticipated because we're stepping over roots, and perhaps it wasn't as well maintained as it had been in the past. I'm not real sure, but we had some little creek crossings and all that, and I was a little concerned that this was a little bit more aggressive than I should be taking my 90-year-old mother on. And she said, no, she was fine. So I said, okay, it's her day. So off we go, and we're walking, and we were gone, I don't know. And granted, we were going kind of slowly because their mom's not the fastest in the world. So after a while, she's like, I'm getting tired. And I said, now, how much longer do you think it's going to be, Mom, before we get to the river? And she said, I don't know. And then we look a little further, and I see a shelter. I was like, oh, that must be it. We get up there. It's not it. This is a creek, not the river. The Neuse River is huge. So then, and only then, I get the brainy idea to look at my map on my phone, and I see, Mom, we're not anywhere near the river. We're at a creek that feeds into the river. So whether or not it had been maybe 10 years since my mom had done this trail, they had rerouted the trail, or she had forgotten how long it was. Turns out we had walked 4 miles to the shelter, and there was a sign saying it was 4 miles either way, back to the parking lot or back to the river. And it's hot. It's about 80-something degrees and humid. In the summertime, our humidity is blistering. Another great reason to come in the other 3 seasons. And while that's fine for me, we had already been hiking now, I'd say close to 3 hours. We're hungry. We had no lunch, no food, no water, no emergency equipment. All we had was my phone. I was like, Mom, do you want me to go find somebody with a boat to come up the creek and get you? She's like, no, don't leave me. Don't leave me here. I said, all right, I won't leave you. I said, what do you want to do? And she's like, I can make it back. We'll go back to the car. So we are going back. Now she's dehydrated. She doesn't want me to leave her. And after, I'd say, another 2.5 hours. Now, we have now been out 5.5 hours without water in the heat, hiking. And I'm getting a little panicky because she's getting really weak. And finally, I was like, Mom, I got to get you some food or water, or go get some help or whatever. And so then I said, please let me sit you down somewhere. I can run and go get some water and a snack or something like that to give you a little bit of energy or get some help. And she said, all right. So I plant her on this stump, and my brother and she stay there so I can run to the car. I get there, grab some water, grab some power bars, and go running back to Mom. Give her the stuff. Turns out the stump I sat her on had chiggers. I don't know if you know what a chigger are. Man, do they itch. So she had been bitten by chiggers. I finally get her all dehydrated again, get her a little snack, and maybe another, I don't know, half hour, hour more. We finally make it to the car. So 7 hours we were out on this picnic walk. I was really scared that I was going to lose my mom. And it was not a fun hike at all. I was really, really scared that I had made a horrible, horrible misjudgment. And the big lesson that I learned there, folks, is no matter how innocent you think the hike is, when you go into the wild, even if it's this innocent little local woods trail, bring stuff. You bring water. You bring a whistle. You bring a snack bar or something. And in fact, because of that and because of another incident where I actually had a friend that died in the woods, I now no longer go into the woods unless I have some basic stuff so that I can spend the night if I have to. I don't bring a tent every time I go in, but I have a heat blanket and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I'll take a picture and put what I must go into the woods with from now on, because it does make me a lot more comfortable. If I'm on a trail or something like that and I get lost, I know I can spend the night out and be fine until help comes or until I can get the strength or daylight to get back home. So anyway, so we kind of laugh a little bit at it, a nervous laugh. That was a life-changing event for me. I changed how I hike after that disastrous Mother's Day hike. But anyway, the trail itself is quite pretty. When you go there, particularly if you park at the Neuse River end, you're right on the river, which is a huge, huge river, almost ocean-like in its width there. And there's an osprey that he's there every year, and you'll see the osprey parents with the two little chicks up in the tree, and they'll be mad when you're walking by. But the trail follows along the river for quite a ways before it turns into the woods and heads back to where we had parked the car on the fateful luncheon day. And if you're really ambitious, you can take the trail the whole 20 some odd miles. And you can free camp on there, anywhere you want. There's a lot of boggy areas, so you just got to be careful where you want to camp. And I would suggest, because you are right by the river, camp by the river. It's free. You might want a hammock versus tent camping because a lot of the ground may be uneven, but it's absolutely beautiful and absolutely free. At the parking areas, there is a bathroom. Otherwise, you are pretty much just free camping. No showers, no facilities there whatsoever. If you do want camping facilities, head a little further up the road to Flanders Beach, where there is camping facilities and also another nice trail, also on the Neuse River. And that's also really nice. And so there's lots of biking opportunities and hiking, just not really long trail there, but again, quite pretty. And the Neuse River is just beautiful. It's a good idea, particularly since we do have hurricanes, and I don't know what year you're listening to this. In fact, we had a nasty hurricane in 2018. After a hurricane, sometimes the trails are closed because trees will have fallen down, and it takes a while to clean them up. And generally speaking, we're kind of cleaning up houses and streets before we clean up trails. So do check, particularly if there's been a hurricane anytime recently, to make sure the trails are open before you do come down here. And again, you can find all the links to everything I'm talking about today at activetraveladventures.com/cc for Crystal Coast. Again, that's activetraveladventures.com/cc. Or just go to the directory page and you can find it there. So hiking-wise, you've got the beach, you've got the maritime forest, and you've got a lot of these little local trails in our national forest, is the Croatan. And so it's just a lovely, very different than my normal mountain hiking. And so it just makes a nice change of pace. Again, you want to make sure you're not hiking in those woods in the summertime because of mosquitoes. So you want to do that in the cusp. So you want to do that mainly in the spring and the fall. And the winter's great for hiking because you don't have the bugs. So it's lovely 3/4 of the year round on there, unless you're just at the ocean itself, because then you don't have the bugs because you have the wind. Another place, if you want to go camping for free right on the water, is if you have a kayak, you can kayak over to Shackelford Banks, or you can take the ferry for a nominal fee. They'll drop you off and then pick you up whenever the day that you want to come back. And there's free camping out there in one of our national seashores. And Shackelford Banks is a beautiful island where the sound meets the sea. And there's lots of wild ponies out there. So there's no doubt that you'll see some. I think there's 50 or 60 out there spread out on the island somewhere. And if you want a really cool event, look on the link on the website that I'll provide where you can see what their schedule is. And the woman who manages the wild horses periodically puts on these walking tours of the island where you learn about the wild horses and the ponies, and it's a lot of fun. So you could combine that with a camping kayaking adventure. Or simply just take the ferry over and back for the walking tour. You'll also see them over at Carrot Island, another great place. So in fact, that's a good segue into kayaking. Kayaking in this area is cool because there's so many little marshes and little inlets that you can go to. So if you're just curious about seeing particularly the waterfowl, the egrets and the herons, of which we have loads of the great blue herons, the kayaks allow you to get up close and personal because you tend not to scare them until you get really, really close. So we've got all these little marshlands you can go into. We've got creeks you can explore, rivers. A little hard to kayak on that, but by the shoreline you could certainly do that. And if you go out to another one of our state parks, Hammocks Beach State Park, up 24 by Swansboro, we actually have kayak trails out in the sea, which is really nice. I think there's 3 of them. And so they're marked with blazes as if you're on a hiking trail. And so you follow the blazes. If you're going to go off the trail out there, because there are so many little marsh grass islands, make sure you bring a waterproof phone cover with your phone, because I did have my girlfriend Kathy got lost out there kayaking because when you're amongst the grass, a lot of it looks the same, and she got a little panicky as the sun was going down, going through all the little corridors of these islands. So if you're going to go off the trail, make sure that you don't say, oh, I'll remember how I get there, because you may not. And you can't get too lost. You'd find your way, or a boat or something will find you eventually, but you don't want to spend the night out there. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. If you take one of the trails from Hammocks Beach State Park, which is another great place for a picnic, you can take the ferry over if you're not into kayaking, or one of your family members or one of your partners on this trip is not a kayaker. They could take the ferry over to Bear Island. You can kayak over and reserve a campsite and spend the night there. It's just beautiful. You can either be on the ocean side or on the sound side. And we went to one last year. Oh my God, just gorgeous. And very reasonable. So I'll put links to that also in the show notes. So Bear Island is definitely worth exploring, and just going on the kayak trails is beautiful. You don't have to bring your kayak. There's lots of places to rent them. And speaking of kayaking through all these beautiful marshlands and islands, remember Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring? That was the book that instigated the whole environmental movement. Well, the Rachel Carlson Preserve is right off of Beaufort, and you can see what inspired her to write that book. You can also do stand-up paddleboarding, and that's becoming more and more popular. I see the stand-up paddleboards out in the White Oak River all the time, and there's several places to rent them, both on the Swansboro side or over on the Beaufort side near where I live. There's also, if you don't want to do the work yourself, you can rent jet skis or boats and go exploring that way. If you'd rather go under the water, consider scuba diving. And here's an interesting fact. The coastline of North Carolina is called the Graveyard of the Sea because of the dozens, if not hundreds, of shipwrecks off the coast. You have the shipwrecks to explore, in addition to the fact that the Gulf Stream comes through here, so the water is really warm, relatively speaking. So it makes it, I think it was listed in the top 20 places to scuba dive in the whole world. One of our famous and notorious former residents was Blackbeard himself. Blackbeard used the sleepy town of Beaufort as his home port whenever he wasn't out pillaging and ransacking and pirating other ships. In fact, his maiden ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, was shipwrecked right off the coast of Beaufort and was found about not even 10, 20 years ago. And there's a great exhibit that just opened up in the Maritime Museum in downtown Beaufort. Well worth a look. Anyway, pirates are a big thing around here. If you come during the summer, try to time it for the pirate invasion, where the entire town of Beaufort turns into shimmer-me-timber pirates. It's a lot of fun. Also, if not, fall, which I said is really the best season, come for Halloween. The whole town goes nuts. Everybody's dressed. The whole town is a big parade, a big party, and it's a lot of fun. Probably one of the coolest places to spend Halloween. But back to scuba diving. I'll list a couple places that you can hook up with local divers to take you out to look at some of the shipwrecks. The commercial charters cannot take you to Blackbeard's location, but if you have your own boat, you're allowed to scuba dive yourself. Of course, don't take any of the artifacts. They're still doing stuff down there, and but it's quite exciting, and it was really big news around here when they finally found the bell and confirmed that it was the Queen Anne's Revenge that was found. Need a little bit more exercise? Take the ferry over to Cape Lookout and climb the lighthouse that helped prevent even more shipwrecks. You'll have the opportunity to climb all 163 feet high, and this unique lighthouse is painted in a vertical black and white diamond pattern. If you look at it from outside and see black diamonds over the white, that means that you're oriented north to south. However, if you see the white over black, then you're facing east to west. It takes you about 207 steps to get to the top, or about 12 floors, but the view is worth it. And Cape Lookout is accessible only by boat, but the ferry leaves both from Harker's Island and from downtown Beaufort. If you take the ferry from Harker's Island, take time to go to the Waterfowl Museum, or better yet, time your visit to coincide with the Waterfowl Festival. It's a lot of fun. As far as biking goes, you can mountain bike some of the trails that we talked about in the National Forest, and if you have a fat, tired bike, you can bike along the beach at low tide, but just remember to wash off your bike really well because it will get salty and sandy, and that makes for a lot of fun. If you can either bike or walk, you want to go to the end of Emerald Isle, which is the far western township on Bogue Banks, the outside barrier island. And as you get to the inlet out there, we call it the Point. And the Point has got very fond memories for me and gives me all the warm and fuzzies. I remember when my sister Jan would get her four-wheel drive and get the permit that you've got to buy to be able to drive your vehicle on the beach. And we drive out to the Point and have a happy hour and just spin around the sand and watch the sun go down. And it's just a magical place. It's absolutely stunning. In fact, that's where I've asked to have my ashes scattered once I pass on to the Neverlands. You're allowed to drive on the beach between Labor Day and Memorial Day if you get the permit and you have four-wheel drive. And again, you want to watch the tides. Most of the beach is quite fat, but there are places where it's thin and you don't want to be caught by the tides. One little aside on the tides, too. Whenever I'm walking the beach and the tide's coming in, I cannot tell you how many times I spend carting people's towels and chairs and memorabilia and all that stuff up because they've gone in for lunch or to take a break and they don't realize how much the tide changes. And they come in like, oh, somebody stole my stuff. Yeah, the ocean stole their stuff. So pay attention to the tides. You can tell by looking at where all the seaweed line is, how far the high tide comes up, and just plan accordingly. If you are renting a beach house and you do plan on going inside for a while, pay attention that your stuff is up above the high tide line so you don't get disappointed when you come back out to the sea. If you want to get out to the Point and you don't have four-wheel drive and or don't want to get the permit, you're going to have to hike it or bike it. And the nearest access is several miles away, so it's a bit of a hike, but I tell you, it's well worth it. It is so beautiful. Just remember the tides. And even though this is not something I normally cover, because you may be coming with members that are interested in it, this is a huge area for fishing, crabbing, shrimping. And if you don't have the equipment, you can rent it here. You can charter boats here, go on charter boats here, rent a boat. If there's anything to do with the water, all you have to do is show up and somebody's got the facilities for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. It makes for a wonderful adventure. And in fact, if you're into the big fishing, one of the biggest prize money tournaments for deep sea fishing in the world is the Big Rock Tournament, which happens in, I think, May or June. And it has like $1 million purse for catching the marlins and all the different categories that they have. And so if you're here during the tournament, at the end of the day, make sure you're at the docks of downtown Moorhead to watch the boats come in with their catch of the day and for their weigh-ins. It's really exciting. There's an interesting story about the tournament I want to share. Back, I don't know, it's been a few years now. There's prize money based on the first person to catch a blue marlin. That's the fish with the big pointy nose. And the one that catches the biggest one, that's the fish they're mainly trying to catch, even though they have prizes, I think, for other fish. But anyway, so this one boat catches this monster that turned out to be not only the first, but the largest, and the prize was over $1 million. Everybody in the boat's really excited because, generally speaking, whoever's working the boat gets a cut of the prize. However, it turns out that one of the crew members was from Virginia, where they don't require a fishing license, and in North Carolina you do. And he could have gotten like a $10 day pass to fish that day and didn't have one, and they forfeited the whole $1 million+ bucks. You got to believe that from now on, there's not a captain letting anybody on their boat without checking the licenses first. But it's a cool tournament. It adds a lot of excitement to the area and a lot of festivities, and makes for a lot of fun. Even though the Big Rock tournament is in early summer, most of the fishing done around here is done in the fall when the migration of fish come through. In fact, I remember once I was just sitting at the beach, wasn't even in my bathing suit, and I saw literally thousands of fish going southbound, and they're really close to shore, and I was like, I got to go out there. So even though I'm fully clothed, I go into the ocean, not even that far off the shore, and literally thousands of these fish are just swarming beyond and just skirting around me. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. I found out later, I don't know much about fish, but I found out later they were bluefish. Another time I'm on the beach, and we have a lot of dolphins around here, and the waves were kind of large that day. The dolphins were putting on a show. They were jumping out of the air and spinning and splashing in the breaking waves. Everybody on the beach was standing on their feet and clapping and cheering. And I swear it's like these dolphins had escaped from SeaWorld and they knew they were putting on a show for us. I have no doubt in my mind they knew exactly what they were doing and they were enjoying all the attention. It was spectacular. And speaking of having fun along the shoreline, one really cool thing you can do is go out to Cedar Island, not Cedar Point where we went hiking before. This is going further east. We call it down east, past Harker's Island, out to Cedar Island, where you can actually take the ferry over to Ocracoke if you're interested. But anyway, at Cedar Island, there's a place that they'll take you on a horse riding tour through the surf, through the marshlands, through the grasslands. It's a really, really cool experience. And you don't have to have any experience with horses. They'll just match you up with the horse that fits your level. And this may very well be one of the highlights of your Crystal Coast adventure. So during the day, you can be out on the water, you can be biking, you can be hiking, you can be swimming, surfing. Yeah, I forgot about surfing. You can surf too around here. Not the hugest waves, but I do see people out there surfing all the time. And surfboards are available for rental too, of course, here. But in the evenings, we also have some great restaurants. It wasn't very much, again, it's been since the roads got here. All of a sudden, we got enough population so that we started to get some decent restaurants that aren't just fried fish. Now we have some really cool-looking foodie scenes coming on board. We're starting to get an art scene. So I've just seen this transformation of our area in the last decade that's unbelievable. So there's lots of things to do at night as well. There's generally live music is huge around here. You can almost always find somebody playing somewhere. Just walk along the waterfront and you'll hear the music and just follow the music. There are festivals throughout the year, but mainly in the spring and the fall, particularly in the fall, with the biggest one being the Seafood Festival, which is one of North Carolina's largest festivals altogether. I know I keep going back to the little town of Beaufort. There's no wonder Budget Travel listed Beaufort, North Carolina as the coolest town in America one year. It really is just a charming historical town. Back when I was in college, it was this rundown, beat-up old, shop-worn-looking town, and you should see it now. It is beautiful. And a beautiful time of year even to see that is at Christmas, when everybody decorates to the nines, and there's just little twinkling lights everywhere. They have a great candlelight tour. So this is truly a year-round destination, depending on the kinds of things that you want to do. I do love North Carolina, and I hope that I've conveyed that to you. If you have any questions, never hesitate to email me. I'm happy to answer anything I can. My email is kit, K-I-T, at activetraveladventures.com. I hope I've encouraged you to come explore my little neck of the woods and see why I think it's special and why I think you'll think it's special too if you come here. The biggest way that people find out about podcasts is by word of mouth. So I'd like to ask you today to please help share the word about the Active Travel Adventures podcast. If you enjoy it, share the love and share it on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever your social channels are. Email it to friends. If you look at the show notes on your phone, you'll see the little box with the arrow that you can forward. That'll send a link to a particular episode that your friend might like. And I would really appreciate helping get the word out. When you share it, be sure to tag me so that I see it and I can thank you personally. It's my goal to share not just great destinations, but to encourage people to feel the empowerment and the joy that you get when you do some of these amazing adventures that we cover on the show. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you'll share it with your friends, and I look forward to sharing even more great adventures with you in this coming year. I've got some great trips planned. I'd love to hear where you're planning on going and places you'd like me to cover. I'm always anxious to hear from you, so never hesitate to email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. I'll look forward to chatting with you again in 2 weeks, and until then, thanks for listening. This is Kit Parks. Adventure on!